So, hello everyone. Although I've introduced myself already to most of you, this is Delaware County's meet and greet event, our first event of the season. My name's Anthony, if you haven't met me yet, Anthony White. And I am excited because in 2018 we had a blue wave, and we have a slate of candidates over here that I'm about to introduce, and I think that we can reproduce that. And I'm going to start with...
Lauren, it's okay, Lauren O'Leary.
Lauren O'Leary, and what are you running for?
I am running for school board of Delaware Academy.
And you are?
I'm Andrew Van Buren. I'm an attorney in Hobart, and I am running for Delaware County Judge.
And you are?
I'm Nick Chase. I am a Democratic candidate for State Assembly in the 102nd District.
And you are?
I'm Eric Ball. I'm running for the 44th District. I'm from Walton, New York.
And you are?
I'm Matthew Mackey, and I'm running for New York State Assembly District 101.
And this is going to be an opportunity to meet your candidates. Make sure they get on the ballot. If you haven't signed petitions before you leave, we're not going to allow you to leave until you sign the proper petitions. And we're going to try to encourage some of you to take some petitions home and get some more signatures, because we really have to get these fine people on the ballot. So let's give a round of applause. And now I'm not going to have an order. I think we're just going to start. They chose the order. I'm going to start over here. No, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, hot seat.
Pull the short straw.
It's because I'm the short one.
You're sitting in the most comfortable chair.
Yeah, I got the comfy chair. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren O'Leary, and I am running for a seat on the Board of Education at Delaware Academy. If you don't know, I'm also the co-founder of the group WIDE. You may have seen some of our posters, some of our events, our library events. WIDE stands for Women for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity. And these are my core beliefs and things that I will also be bringing to the board, because there is nothing more important to me than the health, the happiness, and the safety of every single child at Delaware Academy. I also have a history of public relations. I moved to Delhi about 5 years ago. Before that, I was in Manhattan, and I was a vice president of beauty and fashion. And while it was very glamorous, it also gave me some unique qualities that I think make me a really good candidate for board. For starters, I had to manage many budgets, very large budgets. My clients like L'Oreal and Procter & Gamble, I had millions of dollars that I got to plan, program, and implement. But I also had small budgets, smaller clients, like $10,000 for the entire year. So what does this mean? This means that I really understand the value of the dollar. It also means that I know how to squeeze the life out of every last dollar. I am really good with budgeting. I'm also great at communications. This is one of my best skill sets. And while I think our new superintendent and many of our new board members have done a better job of communicating between the school, the faculty, and our community, I really do think I am the person to take that to the next level. And I have a lot of ideas on how to do that. And finally, I have a great work ethic. I have a proven skill set of coming up with ideas and actually executing them. And I think this is the biggest challenge we have here. I think we all have a lot of great ideas. And I'm really excited to hear all your great ideas, and I am the person to execute them for you. I love the work. I love serving my community. I loved serving my clients in PR, even the incredibly high maintenance ones. They would always give me the most difficult client. I loved bringing together my group of WIDE and hearing their ideas. And finally, I would just love to serve my community. And so I hope you will vote for me on May 17th. Thank you.
So next is Andrew Van Buren, running for county judge.
I am Andrew Van Buren. I am running for the job of Delaware County Judge. I grew up here in Delaware County. I grew up in Hobart. I attended the South Courtright School. And after going away to college and law school, I ended up back here and lived here my whole life. I'm married, I have 2 children, and I have my own private practice. I've built a very successful private practice doing primarily litigation, which what I tell people, if it involves a courtroom, I'm interested in the matter. If it doesn't involve a courtroom, such as real estate matters, transactional work, then I'm generally not interested. So I've spent pretty much my whole career in a courtroom. And even before I had work, I really fashioned myself as kind of a courtroom rat. I would, any chance I got during law school, I would be in the courthouse watching trials, even if it were just for an hour or two. And when I was in Portland, Oregon, where I lived for about a year, same thing. I would, every chance I got, I would make it to a courthouse to watch testimony. I would watch different lawyers practicing their trade, and it was part of the learning process. And throughout my years in private practice, I have not just practiced in the Delaware County Courthouse, but in Otsego County, in Schoharie County, in Broome County. I've been to other courts. I've seen how different judges run their courtrooms. I think I have more than enough experience to be a good county judge. The qualifications of being a good judge really require being a good listener. And I don't think that comes easy to any of us. I don't think any of us wake up in the morning and say, you know, I'm going to be fair today. I'm the most fair person that I know, and I'm just going to walk into the courthouse and make decisions that are fair. I think it's going to have to be a learned art. I will say what Lauren said. I am a hard worker. I'm not afraid to say that, ashamed to say that, embarrassed to say that, and I can back it up. I've always been a hard worker. I'll work hard at being fair. It's not going to come naturally. It doesn't to any of us, I don't believe, but I will work at it, and I will make a very good county judge. The reason I am running is really to get the politics out of the race for county judge. It's an elected position. It's an elected position, and politics plays a role. But what I'm afraid has happened is there isn't a dissenting voice. There isn't an other side to the story. So what happens is the position of judge in this county becomes really an appointed position, unless someone like myself is going to stand up and run. So, but I'm not running as an exercise in civics. I'm not here. This isn't a stunt to raise awareness to the lack of discourse, civil discourse, hopefully, in the county. I want to be your judge, and I'm committed to making that happen. So I hope you get my name on the ballot. I'm a proud Democrat, but as you'll see from my campaign, I'm beholden to none, and that means everyone. But I am a proud Democrat, and I hope you put me on your line, and I hope you vote for me as a Democrat. But I am independent, and I don't make deals. I don't play politics. Thank you.
And now we have Nicholas Chase running for us, State Assembly 102.
Thank you all for coming today. I was glad to hear that you're good at budgeting. I think I found my new campaign treasurer. I grew up on a small farm in Delaware County. It was right over in, not Meredith, but Davenport, right on the line there. I graduated from Franklin in 2018 and went on to study political science at Harvard College. About 3 years into my degree, I hit some financial hardship. I didn't have the financial support from home, so I had to take a leave of absence. In that leave of absence, I started subbing at Franklin when the pandemic hit. It was per diem subbing. I started off that way, and I was really liking my job, kind of considering changing my major to education because I don't see myself as a lawyer. No offense. It's just kind of a boring job. But listen, wait, if you're in the courtroom, it's different. Litigation, like you said, real estate. Nobody wants to do real estate or contracts. But I per diem subbed all last year, and at the beginning of this year, I come in ready to per diem sub again. And the first week of school, I believe it was, they had to fire their middle school science teacher for homophobic remarks to a student. Yeah, that's exactly what I said. So they called me in. I thought I was in trouble. They were like, "Nick, we need you in my office next period." I was like, "Uh-oh, what's this about?" So I go in, and they're like, want to be our new middle school science teacher. I said, put me in, coach, because I am always up for a challenge, and that is one of the reasons I ran for this office, is because I believe our values need to be represented by somebody who cares about our values, and Chris Tague doesn't care about our values. Being a long-term sub, I hear from kids in a very conservative district that they are unhappy with Democrats. And I'm a proud Democrat, so it kind of pains me to hear it. And they're like, Mr. Chase, COVID's a hoax. I was like, not really. I mean, I had COVID, and it put 20-year-old Mr. Chase in the hospital, and I still suffer from memory loss. It's terrible. So if I blank, sorry, but I blank in front of class. I was like, Mr. Chase, you forgot what you were going to say. And I was like, listen, memory loss, COVID's not a hoax. They say, Mr. Chase, Democrats set the milk prices too low. Well, not really. That's set at the federal level. But my plan, hopefully if you want to read through my website, will help offset the low prices of milk for our small farmers. They say, Mr. Chase, our gas prices are too high. It's Biden's fault. Well, not really. And I'd like to correct these misconceptions. The Keystone Pipeline, open it up. Well, it is open. Really? Tucker Carlson didn't say that. But anyway, I'm not running to be a left-wing Democrat. I'm running to be a representative for everybody who lives here. I want to bring opinions together from Democrats and Republicans, because we all want the same thing, to make New York State a better place for us to raise our families. And I'm going to be at a time where I'm starting my family up here pretty soon, and I want it to be a comfortable place for us to live. There are many problems that we face, and it's making New Yorkers move out at a rapid pace, especially young New Yorkers. Well, I'm not one to throw in the towel. I would rather throw in my towel into the campaign, throw in my hat, and run to make it a better place for me to raise my family. I encourage you to shoot me your ideas if you want something to be executed, because that's the best. I can only come up with so much, and listening, like Mr. Van Buren said, is the most important thing when it comes to running for political office. So I hope you guys will support me come election day, and I really appreciate the work you've done thus far, gathering signatures, signing, and such. So thank you.
And now we have Eric Wall running for State Assembly,
New York State Senate.
New York State Senate. It's confusing with the redistricting. New York State Senate 44.
All right. Hi. Yes, so Anthony said, my name's Eric Ball. I'm running for the newly structured district for the 44th district. I did not drive a bus to get here this morning. But just to let you know that this is a big district, and I've been traveling through it these past couple weeks and getting to know voters and getting to know the issues that matter to them. I serve on my village board in Walton. I'm in my second term, and I've had a unique experience to understand what rural communities need and what we need to be investing in. I have a lot of concern for our infrastructure. That is a high priority of mine. Municipalities do have access to funding from the state, but they do not have the necessary funds to cover the total investment in those projects. For instance, we are doing a $1.2 million upgrade to our water system in the village of Walton. However, we have to make the difference of that completion of the project, which is at $2 million. So the village has to bond $800,000 to cover the difference, which puts municipalities on the hook. Municipalities do not have the deep pockets, the taxpayers do not have the deep pockets to fund these investment projects. We need more investment from our state government and our federal government, so that is a huge priority of mine. Also, there's a human infrastructure aspect to this. I went down the street here, Secor Street, met with a voter who, she's concerned about our treatment for addiction. We do have some services in the county, but people don't have the transportation to get there. So how can we do that? How can we let people face that? We need to invest in our transportation. We need to bring more resources to our rural communities so they can get the services that they need and deserve. Similarly, some of the themes that Nick brought up about the climate of our discourse. What happened in this country that we can't sit down with people that we disagree with and solve our problems? You know, I think of generations before me, my grandparents' generation. You know, they'll be the first ones to tell you that they disagree with something. But at the end of the day, they're about problem solving. And we need to be focused on that instead of the just the blood sport that politics is today. My experience working in village government is to my experience in village government is to build consensus and to work with people that we don't see eye to eye in everything, but we know that there are problems to solve, problems. We are there to solve problems and fight for the people that live in this area. And I will fight for every person in this district, from the most vulnerable especially, but for all. And I'm glad to be here, and thank you so much for the petition signing, and happy to answer any questions you have and meet with you after as well. So thank you so much.
And now we have Matthew Mackey, who's running for Assembly. Yes, I got it right that time. 101.
Hi everyone, my name's Matthew Mackey. I'm running for Assembly District 101. I am an unapologetic, queer, non-binary, social justice activist. Thank you. I'm running as the first non-binary person to run for the New York State Legislature, and while that's historic in its own right, I find it's more historic that 101 will actually have good and effective representation if I'm elected, or when I'm elected, I should say. So a little bit about me. I grew up on a small apple farm in Ulster County, New York, with my grandparents, my dad, and my mom, both of whom are deaf. So I grew up in an environment that really exposed me to a different type of culture, one that has invisible barriers that are tough to get around in our hearing community. And I learned the lesson of advocacy, for being able to speak up for my parents and advocate for them at a young age. And I learned that from my grandmother. My grandmother was a fierce woman who raised 5 children out of 10. 5 did not make it back in the day. And so my grandmother, when she raised my father in the 1960s and 70s, there weren't disability organizations. The Americans with Disabilities Act had not been passed yet. And so my grandmother fought every single day of her life to provide my father a decent education until they had to finally make the hard decision to send my dad away to school, for the White Plains School for the Deaf. My dad stayed there most of his life until he was 18. So that's where he met my mom, who was also deaf. And they got a great education. My mom became a sign language interpreter and instructor. My dad became a computer science technologist at IBM, and he worked there for 24 years. And a year before he was supposed to retire, they laid him off. And, you know, that's what I said too. And that happened when I was a teenager. So when I was 16, I decided, okay, my parents are struggling. My mom's having a hard time with finding work. My dad, even after losing his job and having 24 years of experience as becoming a top technologist at IBM, training people from India and China how to do his job. And he was never able to get another position as a computer technologist after that. No other company would give him a chance. I remember witnessing phone calls coming in to give my dad over-the-phone interviews, and my stepmother would answer, she was hearing, and would give them a phone number to call for an interpreting service, and they just would never call back. So my dad had no claim to be able to say, hey, this is discrimination, because there just wasn't the availability to do so. It's hard to prove discrimination in those types of cases. But my dad believed in the power of education. So my dad moved to Kentucky to pursue a degree in deaf studies at Eastern Kentucky University, became an adjunct professor, and then even though he still couldn't make ends meet, he worked at a fast food restaurant. My mom now works as a teacher assistant at the school that she was raised in. So I learned the power of education, and when you have the tools to succeed, you can survive and thrive. However, there's still invisible barriers that prevent people from being able to really succeed in life. So I've got a lot of experience in advocacy with my current position. I serve as an Advocacy and Government Relations Committee person for the National Association of Social Workers, New York State chapter. I set up their policy agenda. I also analyze legislation word for word to see how it's going to directly impact disenfranchised community groups. Then I meet with legislators and I advocate for changes to that language to be able to impact groups. So I believe in policy advocacy through information and also through education. So I have a plan with educational facilities all throughout the New York State to empower our civics education for students, to also include advocacy classes so that students learn how to advocate for themselves directly to legislators, because students have opinions and voices that need to be heard. We also need diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I have an inclusive education plan that creates sex ed inclusive education for LGBTQ students, because LGBTQ students are 4 times more likely to commit suicide and 7 times more likely to contemplate committing suicide. And I'm one of those people when I was a teenager. So that's a direct relation to me and how we need to improve our school system by really investing in our students, creating an equitable environment for people to learn and helping people survive and thrive in the area. My other points of plans is I used to be a healthcare advocate for families who had special needs children. So I've really seen the issues within the healthcare system that make it a cruel system that can cause a lot of harm to people. I once had a client who was an 11-year-old traumatic brain injury patient who suffered an accidental gunshot wound to the head. And I took the family on 6 months after the child was recovering in the hospital. And he had finally woken out of a coma. Bills were starting to come through. The insurance company wasn't paying them. And ironically, I was working for the insurance company. So they hired me to argue with them, which makes no sense. It's a huge waste of resources. Besides the point. But I fought for this family for 12 months to get their bills paid. He was still in and out of the hospital, in and out of long-term care facilities. And then COVID started. And his doctor said, if he gets COVID, he won't make it. We're recommending to send him at home for at-home treatment. Insurance company wouldn't cover it. We argued and argued and argued for 6 months. He got COVID and died. That's a result of our healthcare system. It's not set up to protect people, it's set up for profit. I've worked in the system for 3 years to learn the ins and outs. Although Obamacare was a great step, there are loopholes that insurance companies exploit every single day. Insurance companies don't have to follow Obamacare, depending on the type of insurance plan that you have. So I believe healthcare is a human right, and that is why I advocate for the New York Health Act, as well as expanding the New York Health Act to include anti-racism and anti-homophobia and anti-transgender or transphobia issues within the medical community. And the last point that I think we need in this area is transportation and directly investing in our communities. So transportation, broadband, and I mean, I've heard the stories up and down the district of people with issues with broadband and cell phone expansion. I live in Ulster County, which is about 2 hours downstate, or an hour and a half on a good day. And half of my drive up here, I had no cell service. And that's a public safety issue. Because if you get into a car accident and you need an ambulance, who's going to call for your ambulance? That's a huge problem. So we need to elect a Democrat into 101 because, unfortunately, Republicans, or this isn't unfortunately really, it's Republicans don't have any power in the legislature. So they don't have leverage to be able to direct funds into our district, which would provide for those infrastructure projects. So we need to elect a Democrat in there, so that way we can get the funds in. And I am more than happy to take any questions about me, my life story, or about our policies at the end. And thank you.
Okay, I don't know about you, but I'm impressed, and I would vote for everyone. But I'm in some districts, so I can't vote for everyone. We're going to have a Q&A period, and basically you get to go and ask any or all the candidates some questions. So does anyone have any questions? Anyone like to start? Okay, so you're not going to be on camera, but just say your name and what town you're from.
I'm Chrissy in Delphi. Thank you for telling us why we should vote for you, but I'm also a jerk, so why should we not vote for the person you're running against?
You know what, I'm going to go and say that question, and I got a little bit of help with some questions in case people are shy. That was an important question, that's what I was going to start off with, and I think each one will answer that. And we'll start with you. You have the most comfortable chair.
I'm going to sit down for this one. Well, I'm a very positive person, so this is a hard question for me to answer. I really do think everyone can bring something. But as many of you know, I am running for this position because there is someone running who goes against everything I believe in. Mr. Nate McCarthy, and you may know him. He has been on News Around Delhi. He fought vehemently against the diversity statement. He has been at many board meetings fighting against the masks, even though the mandate came from the government. And he also started a Facebook page where people can grieve their issues with Delaware Academy. And I don't think that is appropriate. I think if you have an issue with the school, you should go directly to the school. I think we all know that there is a huge problem. There's a huge shortage of teachers, and we are so fortunate that even in our small community, we're not dealing with that, but that doesn't mean that that will remain. So we really need to value our teachers and our faculty. They are very important. I would never speak ill of them. I would go in and problem solve, right? You can't have a problem. You can't have a problem without a solution. I'm a solution-based person. And, you know, again, the problem with fighting a diversity statement is you are negating half of the population of our school. There's economic diversity, there's sexual diversity, there's, you know, gender and race and religion diversity, and that makes our community more rich. It's more interesting. I don't want to live in a place where everyone has to be the same and only the star quarterback gets rights. I want to hear what every kid has to say. I'm interested in every child. So that is why I'm running, and why you should not vote for my opponent.
Okay, next Andrew, and that was Lauren, I'm sorry. We just met, so anyway. Next is Andrew.
Why you should not vote for my opponent?
It's a tough one.
It's a tough one for me because my opponent is John Hubbard, who also happens to be a very good friend of mine.
Ooh.
So I don't have very many bad things to say about John Hubbard. I have known him a very long time. I knew him before either one of us went to law school. I know John to be trustworthy. I know he's intelligent. And I supported him in his primary run for the job of county judge. So what happened? Why am I now running against him and think I am a better candidate? Basically what it boils down to is, again, I'll come back to politics again. I am not a political animal. I've never been in politics. I've never lived my life in a political way. I've never thought I was going to need friends along the way up. So I'll wait for that to stop. That's loud. So climbing the ladder, climbing the political ladder, I don't have a base of people who I have made promises to, who I've shook hands with, who I've attended dinner parties with. I've just gone about my business of practicing law, and that's a full-time job. Of course, being a parent and a husband is my most important job. So I think with me as a candidate, you're going to get the trustworthiness that you would expect from any candidate who's running for the job, such as John. But you get a bonus with me, and that is that I really don't have an allegiance to anyone other than the truth. And as I've said before, God. I am a Christian. I have a special relationship with God. It will be how I start every morning as a judge, praying for strength and for peace and for patience. You know, I really, you know, it's a tough question because I don't have anything bad to say about John. I just think I would be a better candidate because of my independent status. So I hope you vote for me.
Okay, next, Nicholas.
All right, where do I start? I hope you have time. All right. All right, so when the pandemic started, everybody was on board with getting aid to our small businesses. It wouldn't be advantageous to any of us for them to close, as many of them are family or friends, and they rely on us to go and support them. Well, a period into COVID, there was when the aid was up, there was a bipartisan vote to extend that aid to small businesses, including businesses in the 101st District, and Chris Tague voted against it. But when we get to the bigger one, it's the no-show job that he had back before he was an assemblyman. He worked in Albany during Hurricane Irene, and he had to be there. That was before virtual was a thing. There was no zooming into work, working from home. He had to be in Albany every day, and the minimum amount he had to work was 17.5 hours to be eligible for state health insurance. And he didn't go to work, and we have proof that he didn't go to work. Somebody was signing his time sheets into him for exactly 17.5 hours per week. And then he turns his back on the constituents of the 102nd and votes against health care for all New Yorkers. So I'd like to ask him what makes him better than any of us, any of the people that voted for him. What makes him better? He's eligible for state health insurance, which he made sure of by falsifying those employment documents, but he turns his back on the constituents of the 102nd and denied them the same health insurance that he gets. Frankly, as a taxpayer, that kind of disgusted me, and I think he should have to answer for that. His past opponents might have gone easy on him for that, but I don't intend to.
Yeah.
Okay, next, Derek.
Well, I would have to say, you know, in public service, your record counts. And I would point to my opponent's record. What has he done? You know, beyond lip service, what has he provided? I think I've accomplished more in my village board in 4 years than he has in his term for far less the pay. Not in it for the pay.
Eric, can you remind us who you're running against?
Mike Martucci.
Okay.
So, as the other candidates have mentioned, you need that partnership in Albany to deliver for constituents. You see sort of a grandstanding politician out there making stunts rather than focusing on delivering for constituents. Recent example, my opponent voted against the Budget 1 proposal in the Senate. That had a lot of great investment priorities there. One of them, for instance, was the temporary suspension of New York State gas tax. In addition to that was investments in childcare, and a litany of reasons of why you should vote for that. He voted no. While people are struggling, while families are struggling, he voted no. He should answer to that from the voters, and he'll answer it for me as well. We need to have solutions. People are struggling, and look at his record, and that'll show you what, give you your reasons why not to vote for him. So.
Now, Matthew.
So my opponent is Brian Mayer. who's the town of Montgomery supervisor. And so all Republicans in the legislature, regardless of whether they're on the Senate side or in the Assembly, are not really going to be effective legislators. The Democrats have a supermajority in both the Senate and the Assembly, and that's most likely not going to change in this election season. And so they'll have no leverage to be able to bring funds to this district, to be able to actually represent the individuals as a whole. I'm running because I want to represent everyone in this district. And Brian is running to represent only the Republicans. And that's a problem, because half of our district, if not more, go unrepresented, their voices go unheard, and that is just completely unacceptable. As a representative, it doesn't matter what party someone belongs to if they're a constituent. You help them, and I'm very effective at getting help. I don't like taking no for an answer, and so I am very effective at getting things done. I haven't been elected yet, but 2 weeks ago I was in Otsego County, and I was petitioning, and I met with a family that had been arguing with Spectrum for 7 months about a rotted pole that was on their property, and Spectrum didn't want to do anything about it. And when I went up there, the pole was leaning against the main power line for the town. So the next day, I called Spectrum, and within 24 hours, that pole was removed, because that's how you get things done as a legislator. So I'm not elected, but I get things done, and that's why you should vote for me over my opponent.
I think we feel that way. Could you just say your name and what town you're from,
Sure.
and who's the question directed to, or all the candidates?
Okay, I'm Michael Kaufman, I live in Bovina, and my question is for Nicholas Chase, because since I'm in this redrawn district. You mentioned in your statement just now, and in your written, when you passed out, that you're for healthcare. You did not mention whether you were for the New York Health Act specifically, and I'd like to hear your position on that and your reasoning.
Okay, so as my website states, I believe healthcare is a human right, like you say. But we also remain in a district that has a 15-point lead enrollment-wise by Republicans, and their input matters too. So what I think is a good idea is I think that there should be a baseline safety net for all people that live in New York, because nobody should have to worry about what the doctor is going to cost when they go, because a lot of people don't go to the doctor because they're worried about the cost. But you also have Republicans that say that if everybody has the same health care or same insurance, that their quality is going to go down. And, you know, they could have a point there. So in order, I thought about this, and in order to appease that, I thought that we could have that safety net for the unfortunate. And for the more fortunate people, they could buy their own private plans through their employer or by themselves. And this would ensure that everybody could have access to health care without having to hear concerns that their quality of health care wouldn't be good enough if they shared it with everybody else, if it was the same type of health care.
I'm sorry, you state your name and what town you're from.
Carla from Franklin. I have been involved in the New York Health Act for a long time. I'm an advocate, a strong advocate. I come from Dick Godfrey's district in Manhattan. I know, he's the first person who put it out there, and it's done it since 1992. And Eric, I want to ask you, on your website, what it says is something to the effect of that you support most of the New York Health Act. So I'd like to know what part of the New York Health Act you don't support.
So it's more concerns about what rug might be pulled out from under people within the state and the federal level, or should the legislature change. I'm concerned with Medicaid, but by and large, you know, these network barriers that people have, people with co-pays, people have to drive hours away to get a dentist if they're in Fidelis care. I support many provisions, but I do understand that it's not permanent. It's not a permanent fix. But there's more that I'm going to research on that, and I do support many provisions of that act.
Your name and what town you're from?
Lou Gilson from the town of Hamden. And my question is for the candidates for Senate and my Assembly district. All right. If you're elected to these positions, you'll not only be dealing with issues regarding the district and the people in your district, you'll be dealing with issues that regard the state as a whole and do not affect the people in your district. So my question on you, on both of you, is what is your understanding of and position regarding the sovereignty of Native nations and treaty rights?
So I guess we'll start with, that would be, so Hamden is Eric and Matthew. So which one of you wants to start for?
So, first of all, I typically like to start out with a land recognition that we do reside on Lenape tribe and indigenous peoples territory. And that they've never given that or seceded that property or land up. They are the keepers of the land, and so we need to honor and respect the members of the Lenape tribe and learn about them. And that is, we can't really address the systemic issues that we have in our legislature throughout every policy without having the cultural discussion of the impacts from settler colonialism. As a social worker, that's one of the first things that we learn is being able to identify where systemic oppression happens within major cultural groups. So for me, it's empowering individuals of indigenous descent, as well as informing the public about those indigenous individuals, their cultures, and their respective belief systems, because they still exist, and we should be fighting for them and not silencing them.
America?
So our indigenous communities in New York State are some of the hardest hit on social issues. I spent some time at college in Fredonia in western New York, so I drive through Salamanca and through the reservations in that area. We have a rich history and such a value in that community, and we need to respect their territorial rights and support them, support those communities. They are underserved. So I'm glad you raised that. I'd like to speak with you more about that as well.
Yes, thank you for the question.
Anyone else have a question? My good friend Chrissy prepared me for this, so just give me a second. And actually, this one I am very concerned with, because I am a transplant, not ashamed of it. I didn't know how to drive till I came up here, so I'm going to read this question. Delaware County currently has no public transportation options. And this would be more for the people running for state senate. What do you think could be done to support even limited public transportation here?
I'd actually like to add something,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
if you don't mind.
Go for it.
I think public transportation is actually a huge issue at the school level as well. I think that there are a lot of kids who are left out of some of our wonderful sports programs and after-school programs because their parents are working 2-3 jobs and cannot get to the school to pick them up. We have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into infrastructure, and I know this has been something that has been brought up many times, but I would really like to bring, again, the idea of the busing to get these kids home so that they can participate. And if we can't afford buses, let's brainstorm. Let's come up with another idea. Let's do carpools. Let's work with the PTA. I mean, again, this is a huge problem, and I know there's a solution, and so I really hope that I can be a part of that.
Excuse me, can I say something? Because I worked on trying to get transportation for the county. I worked at Office for Aging, and we worked on it for 3 years, and we got federal funding and state funding and buses. And the Board of Supervisors turned it down because it was a liability issue, having too many people in a vehicle. So it's not only the state level we have to worry about, we have to worry about our county supervisors who don't care that we have one of the oldest populations in the state, and they have no way of getting around. So I just wanted to inform people that I had 30 people at least working on this. We got all the way to the end, and the supervisor said no.
Could you state your name and what town you're from?
I'm Laura Stewart, and I'm from the town of Delhi. And
Okay.
I worked on that for 3 years, from Office for the Aging.
I think this question would perk some people up. Someone else wants to say something? And then we still have to get answers from you, but someone else want to say something?
I'm Pat Scroll from Delhi, and maybe it's hopefully now, in the age where we're like connected on either by email or Facebook, I didn't know about that. And if I just feel like that's the time, it makes me almost cry. It's like that's the type of thing where we need to then get people who do care to go to the Board of Supervisors and say, why are you doing this? You know, I mean, it's just...
We'll run for office and fire them.
Well, can I say something?
Yes.
One of the reasons is they don't even give you the privilege of the floor.
No,
Actually, Sue was one of the people that worked with me on this. And we did such a tremendous job. We had such hardworking people. We had people from all different organizations. And the board just, you know, and I tried to get it out to the people. We did. We tried talking to, and everybody was on board. These, constituents were on board. But we can't do anything without the support of the Board of Supervisors.
Right. When it comes to the Board of Supervisors, my suggestion is go to your town board meetings and get after the individual town supervisors who make up the Board of Supervisors at the county level.
So what I'd like to do is bring this back to our state level candidates. However, I think it's important, after you're all in office, come and lobby against our local government. Or, I mean, I shouldn't say for, but we're heavily red. So we'll go back to Nicholas.
Well, it would be against our local government if the Board of Supervisors
Exactly.
was to turn down public transportation. But yeah, the best way to rectify a problem of the incompetent board is to run for office yourself. And I'm sure a lot of people in this room could do a great job at that.
Oh my God.
But the public transportation in Delaware County.
Yes. Yeah, because Otsego County is something similar, Otsego Express, and that goes to all different towns throughout Otsego County. And I think that's something Laura was trying to work on. You wanted a county-wide for Delaware.
Yes, I work closely with Otsego County.
But if we can't get past the Board of Supervisors, we have to look at other alternatives. They didn't want a lot of people on a bus because it was a liability issue.
Yes.
Then maybe you could secure state and federal funding for... for something else. I was about to propose my alternative. If you could use that money to subsidize, like everybody knows what Uber is, right? Where people go around, it's like a taxi service. And if we could subsidize that so it's affordable to our elderly people, that wouldn't be the liability that, I say that in quotes, that the bus would have. And so try to work around, but it still gets our elderly citizens and our people without transportation methods from point A to point B safely.
So we'll do Eric next.
So to bring it back maybe to the 1950s, Delaware County, when we lost the railroad, that really impacted our communities, especially villages like Walton. The lack of public transportation has been such a burning issue for me, because I've been in that situation where I can't get to point A or point B because my car is in the shop. You know, there's no network for the elderly, of course, but it's a workforce issue too. And I know there are some things in the work to try to find some taxi type services, but that's not adequate. The size of Delaware County, look at it. We can't be running on a taxi service in Delaware County. In Sullivan County, they have Sullivan Move, which is a public transportation system. That is a good step. It's affordable, however, there are issues there. Spoke with voters that issues with finding when a bus would arrive, or maybe buses don't arrive because people don't show up at those spots. So even when those services are there, you still have to have that network or support to ensure that they're running efficiently and serving the people that they're designed to serve. I like what that program is trying to do, but there are issues. I'd like to see that program, types of programs expanded in Delaware County and throughout rural New York. And I know people in Middletown have worked on this issue recently, and so I'm very passionate about that. You have a Trailways bus system that comes through Delhi. I've taken that, utilized it, it's great. And it's also provided a lifeline for communities. So people can come up from the city and consider staying in these communities, spending their money, maybe even just moving here because they don't have other means of transportation. So it's absolutely critical that we expand public transportation because it is essential to the growth of our rural communities. So I'm glad you raised that topic. Thank you.
Matthew?
So public transportation is an extremely important cause for me. Specifically, I live in Ulster County, so Ulster County does have a good public transportation system, but throughout my time on the upper portion of the district, there is a lack of public transportation, and that's not just a personal public issue. That's also an infrastructure issue. It's an environmental justice issue. It really does directly impact the daily lives of individuals, whether or not it's going to a doctor's appointment or whether it's going to work. So I completely support an expansion of public transportation. And I do have a question for you. You had said that the buses were purchased. What happened to the buses?
Well, they were donated.
They were donated?
By the state. I had a very good connection with one of the DOT people in the state. He was working with us all 3 years.
Gotcha.
And we also had a connection with the federal government because he used to work in Delaware County. And so that's why we got the funding from the federal government.
Yeah.
And that's how we got all the money. And they walked me through all the research, all the grants, everything. Yeah. And Otsego County also worked really well with us. And we were going to have transportation back and forth from Oneonta to Delhi 3 times a day. And they wasted the money. They never gave the money back.
Oh. That's so unfortunate. I'm so sorry. I really am.
I have a follow-up question on...
Okay, I'm sorry. Name, just first name and town.
Yeah, Michael Kaufman, Bovina.
Okay.
It's coming up with the local school boards about buying new buses for the school buses, and I think it intersects with some of your project, about electrifying buses and what they're up to. And this is obviously a very expensive transition. There's also mechanical issues in a rural area about electric buses, but it's an existential problem. If we don't cut that pollution, school buses have a history of being particularly polluted. And so I'm interested in your folks' responses. Well, that actually applies to everybody except, I suppose, not directly to the judge candidate.
Oh, don't worry, I got a question for him coming up later. So everyone else, we can start with Lauren.
So what is your question exactly?
Well, it's do you support and would you be willing to work for helping fund the electrification of our school bus fleet, basically starting immediately? And it's a big expense, but...
Yes, I understand. So the environment is one of my favorite topics of conversation. My husband's actually a renewable energy attorney, and so this is something we discuss a lot. The short answer is, of course, yes, I am absolutely for that. The longer, more complicated answer is I would be very pro that if we can also negotiate, as I mentioned before, the after-school transportation. I would not want to sacrifice one for the other. I also think we live in a community where there are actually a lot of experts in mechanics. And I think this is something that we could discuss at a local and federal for funding to teach people through SUNY Delhi, existing mechanics on how to take care of these buses. I think that's an excellent idea, and I think it doesn't just help them with the buses, but opens up a whole new career path. To me, it's a win-win. Great question.
Eric.
Nick?
I'm sorry, Nick.
That's all right. I won't hold that against you.
Okay.
Yes, I support the electrification of school buses, but I do have some concerns. It's actually a coincidence. I had somebody from school, they were talking to me about it the other day. They said it was in New York's, is it the Climate Protection Act? Is it already in the Climate Protection Act, or is it just being talked about? I'm trying to think, because they were talking about it, and they were worried because in Franklin, the power grid isn't as big as some other places, that would really take a lot of power away, because charging our entire fleet of school buses, we have quite a few. So you have to look at the pros and cons in that, and that does require more research. I don't want to give you something I'm not informed on, but overall I support the idea, especially if we do have federal and state funding, because I'm not an advocate for unfunded mandates, especially on our rural communities, because they really can't take it. But overall, I support the clean energy initiatives, and I would like to see that happen if it can be done sustainably.
Now, Eric.
Yep. So you're seeing a standard start to be set on the federal level with electrifying federal vehicles. So as we transition towards that, and I think we are going to transition towards that, you know, as Nick said, it has to be sustainable. It has to be what communities can afford. We all know, you know, people in Delaware County, people in the towns around, the school budgets are a big issue. But I do support transitioning our school buses to a more sustainable model, of course. But it needs to be affordable for the taxpayers to do that.
And Matthew?
So I support electrifying our school buses and public transportation in general. And we can use some of the infrastructure money that Congress passed to develop green technologies and invest in our power grid to strengthen it, to be able to have that process begin to happen in an affordable manner for rural communities, of course. But yeah, going green is going to be essential for our communities. And, you know, I say this on the campaign trail a lot, but if we don't fix our environment now, in 15 years, none of the things that we're going to be fighting for really are going to matter if we don't have a habitable planet to live on. So that's why it's important to get ahead of the curve and start addressing those issues now.
Oh, okay, we have a bunch of questions now. Would you like to state your name and town?
Yes, I'm Sue Datkins. I'm from the town of Meredith. I want to ask a question about environmental green energy projects in Delaware County that are being placed on farmland, agricultural land. And there's some controversy about there being very little protection for ag land in the push to develop particularly solar. Do you have any insights or thoughts on that?
I'm trying to randomly get people to speak, but all right. So I'll start with Matthew.
So I believe that agricultural property needs to be protected for our farmers, especially small and medium-sized farms. However, there should be also informational drives to let these farmers know that they have the ability to convert their agricultural land into a solar farm if they should so choose. I believe that we should protect all of our agricultural land, but it should be an informed decision made by property owners.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So, well, I know an effective way to do that is from the ground level in your municipalities, with your planning boards and your zoning. That's where that protection lies. That's where those decisions lie. I mean, of course, there are state standards. You know, I have a lot of friends that have farmed and still farm. I think it is they are the fabric of our rural community, and we need to protect our farmland. But property owners do have that right for their land. But certainly, I have a lot of experience with on the municipal level, understanding how do we protect our districts, and but that's something I'll dedicate to research more. I appreciate the question.
I agree. Protecting the farmland is important, whether it's for growing crops or growing hay, because hay takes a lot of space and farmers rely on it, especially for their cattle. I like what you said, that farmers should be involved in making the decision. It needs to be an informed decision. We don't want to go the route of eminent domain or anything like that, because that would not be very good for our farmers that rely on that land. Because if they don't have land to farm, they're not farmers anymore. So a viable alternative would be looking for places that aren't really suitable for farming, but could still be suitable for solar panels. That would be our best bet, or allowing farmers to make their decisions. But like I said, I'm not sure how many farmers would sign on board, even if it was selling the land for solar panels. So it's a difficult discussion that would require more research.
Are there more questions? Okay, name and town.
Ruth Ann, I'm from Southport, right? I just have a couple of comments, hopefully I can remember all of them. First, speaking about buses, I know in our school, they purchase one new bus every year, and so it's a staggered approach, so that they don't have to dump all the money. So I'm assuming that a lot of the schools do the same. And so in that case, maybe you could start to introduce, as long as they don't require the schools to do it all at once, they could start to introduce all, you know, in a staggered way, and also take that time to teach and learn and all that. Hopefully they would offer the courses at OCs and different things like that. And in terms of transportation as a whole, it's a big county. You know, you've got mental health at one end of the county, you've got the county seats sort of in the middle, but not really. It affects everything from your schooling, your BOCES programs. It affects, you know, one that hits hard with me is things like probation. Now, hopefully the kids don't end up on probation, but it's hard, like when they have to report to the county and there's no transportation to get there, when they have to, you know, follow through with all of those steps, it's a long ways for them to go. And if they're just coming out of a situation where they don't have employment, they don't have transportation, how can they meet all those requirements? And it just ends up sending them right back into trouble in the first place. So, anyway, so I feel strongly about transportation. I think it's a real problem here.
I'm sorry, this has nothing to do with me, but I had to ask you, because that's a really good point. Could they do probation via Zoom?
I think probably because of COVID, they did do a little bit more with that. But in some cases, like with drug cases, they have to provide samples.
I see.
And there's no, like, it's far to come to Delhi. So I work for Bassett for school-based health, so support that too. But we have a courier that runs to all the different clinics. So I don't know why we couldn't set up something with the clinics or the hospitals where people could go to a remote location. They all have labs. Sydney has a lab, Delhi has a lab. You know, some of the other clinics have a lab. And so it's just, there's gotta be some way to network and work with people. You know, probation's maybe not a very popular topic, but it's a great example of how people can't get anywhere and how it just keeps them down where they're at.
Someone else have a question, name and town?
Yes, my name's Martin Lerner. I'm from Roxbury, and I haven't followed the news on this, but about last fall I went to a town hearing in Grand Gorge on the Hughes Energy project, and I had a very strong adverse reaction to this because I felt that in the name of sustainability and clean energy, it was actually going to produce a lot of CO2, and the output would be very detrimental to the Catskills. And I want to know if you have a position on that, or if you can update us on that, or what we can do, and to hear your comments on it.
Okay, still trying to do it random. Let's start with Eric. I'm going to try to...
Yeah, so I'm become aware of that issue recently, and certainly the opposition. I know people have gone to meetings on this and been quite invested and concerned, as rightly so. Walton is the site of the county landfill, so I know what that means to a community to have that type of facility and what those types of concerns are. You know, affecting quality of life, the quality of the air. You know, we produce garbage. You know, it's got to go somewhere, but it can't be just there it is, and this is what you're going to have to deal with. So that's an issue that I have been researching, that my campaign has been reaching out to our local elected officials, because I'm concerned about it, and I appreciate you raising that, so thank you.
Nicholas?
What was the project called again?
It's called Hughes Energy, and
Could you give me the rundown?
What's that?
Could you give me like a rundown? I'm not familiar with that.
It's based in, they want to purchase an area, a former land waste site in Prattsville, and what they do is they're supposed to be, it's supposed to be some kind of recycling of the waste. But the problem is it would require 24/7 output of carbon emissions through propane or natural gas to keep it fired up. And then you'd have trucks coming in from multiple counties into Delaware County. And there's a lot of, I'm not a scientist, but it just didn't feel right. It felt like, I think there's a term in the environmental community called greenwashing. It felt like that people really, in the name of sustainability, they were selling this company Hughes, Hughes is based in Windsor, actually in Wyndham, is actually, I've heard that they're going to try to set it up and immediately resell it. So it just, there is a movement, you see the posters around my town called Don't Trash the Catskills. And I think there's a lot of pushback to it, and I think it's with DEC right now. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. That doesn't sound very sustainable if they have to do that, so
Right.
I see your concern. I would like to give more research on that, but the way you described it, it doesn't sound like something that should be supported. We could look at viable alternatives for that, but I'd like to do some more research and look at the numbers just before I make an actual opinion on it. But I appreciate the question.
Okay, and I can, will you all be sharing your email addresses?
Yeah.
Matthew?
So I actually just took that note down to look into that because this is the first I'm hearing of it as well. However, it sounds like what you're describing is if it's going to pour more CO2 into our environment, that's not sustainable. So that only encourages further of climate change.
Right.
So it definitely needs to be researched to find a viable option, because we're going to have to do something with the trash that we're all producing. But again, yeah, it doesn't sound like something that it should be supported.
Name and town?
Yeah, hi. I'm James, new resident of Delaware County, living in Fleischman's. I moved up here about 2 years ago, as a lot of people did from downstate, the city area. Grew up on Long Island as a lifelong New Yorker, and vacationed in the Catskills my whole life. what I want to know from each of you is what you're doing to kind of take advantage of the fact that there are a lot of new residents in the county, most of which came from the city area, most of which are also Democrats. And so while this whole area is blood red as far as I can see, I also think there's a big opportunity to kind of motivate new voters like me who maybe don't know the local issues as well. So what are each of you doing to try to engage voters like me who might be new here and might also feel kind of put out by the fact that like there is very much I grew up here, my whole family has grown up here, this is, you know, my land, and who the hell are you guys? And then people like me who are like, I come in peace, I just want what you guys want, I'm part of the community too now, so would love to hear that from you.
I'm going to chime in because I'm a transplant from 13 years now, so I know exactly what you're saying. But we'll have the candidates. All right, we'll start with Matthew this time.
Sure. So part of my campaign plan is to reach out to new residents throughout the district, as well as younger voters, because there is a low turnout rate there. And looking at just our numbers in general, there's a lower turnout rate for our entire district. And most of that is because for over a decade, this district has really had no voice in the legislature. And having no voice in the legislature leads to hopelessness. And that leads to low voter turnout because people don't feel like their voices are being heard. So part of my main focus in my campaign is going to allow people to have their voices heard and represented in the district. That will inspire people to come out to vote. It will inspire new voters to come out to vote. And it's also inclusion. So a lot of campaigns focus on high numbers and scores with voting, but that only leads to the people who already are going to be voting to just come out and vote for you, and it excludes the people that might want to vote if they had just had someone reach out to them. And so my campaign is planning on knocking on every single door in the district with a lot of volunteers. It's a large district, but I'm confident we can have that happen.
Eric?
Yep. Well, I'll just say that you'll see here, I mean, these people are running, excluding the school board, but correct me if I'm wrong, as Democrats in traditionally conservative county. So I think, candidates here, they inspire me to be connected, to engage in my community. There's a lot of people moving to this area and bringing a lot of talent and a lot of passion. And I want them to know that I appreciate that they're making that move and making that commitment to this area because it's desperately needed. And I have a lot of friends in Walton that have moved up from the city that have called that their home. And they're starting to put businesses in downtown again, things we haven't seen in decades. And I celebrate that. And it's so important to know, let them know that how much they are valued, and I'm looking forward to engaging in them in the future. So,
yeah, they are welcome additions to me. I mean, they could vote Democrat down in New York City, but it doesn't pack as much of a punch as it does up here when they all move up here. But like Matthew said, engaging them is of utmost importance through particularly door-to-door knocking. When I first was contemplating running for office, I met with all the county chairs, and the Albany County chair said that it wasn't sustainable to go door to door in this district. And I said, I don't care about sustainability. Door to door conversations are important. Don't get me wrong, I will phone bank, and my volunteers will phone bank, but if you don't make door to door, if you don't show them that you're working for their vote, I believe it's going to crumble and burn before it even gets off the ground. Hopefully the new additions from the city can make this more of a toss-up district all across the board, and we'll see about that. But communication is everything, and I intend to, even if it makes driving to rural areas, because how many times, if you live in an area with a bit of a longer driveway, how many political candidates have knocked on your door? I know none of them knocked on mine. If you don't live right in the village of Delhi or right in the village of anywhere in the district, you're not getting a door knock. So if you go out to rural areas and just go up to their door, they're more, number one, more likely to answer because people usually don't show up at their door. So they oh, is it a telemarketer? Is it a Jehovah's Witness? Who is it? I don't want to answer. But if you go to a rural area, they're going to be, number one, more apt to answer, and number two, they're going to be happy that you put in the effort to show up. And I intend to put in that effort, and I will continue that effort when I'm representing them in Albany.
Matthew, question.
Name and town.
Beth from Augerville. And I'm not in your district, I don't think, but I'm very upset I'm not. I'm probably with you. But when you keep saying that like you don't have the legislative power, is because they're not advocating with the like working with Democrats, like purposely, or is it they don't have the power because they're not a Democrat and Democrats are not working with them? That's what I'm trying to understand.
So essentially it's because no major legislation will ever pass with a Republican's name on the front as a sponsor, because it just won't simply pass unless it goes in a bipartisan manner. But that's few and far between. There are moments of bipartisanship in Albany, which is a nice change of pace, I would say. However, it is becoming more and more apparent that the Republican Party is the party of opposition, and that prevents districts like mine from being able to grow, and, well, ours really, including, well, I mean, all of our districts really. The way our assembly structure works is to get legislation passed, you have to have enough sponsors and things like that, but you also have to have leverage with other politicians to be able to get them to support your campaign, and you know, a lot of the quote-unquote backroom dealing that happens up in Albany, which I personally don't like backroom dealing, but that is how Albany works right now. That being said, because we have this structure, there isn't really that much that allows for Republicans to have a leverage to be able to pass their bills. Because they need Democrats to get anything passed. So it's kind of a mix of both, if that answers your question.
Could I make a clarification, because it drives me crazy?
Name and town.
Yeah. Carla from Franklin. Just so you all know, at this point, the Republican Party, insofar as registered voters in New York State, is a minority party. The Republican Party, there are approximately 21% who are registered, enrolled as Republicans, 22 or 23% not affiliated, and 50% Democrats. So we're in an anomaly here, because if you go through the rest of the state, there are whole communities where there are no Republicans. And so the Republicans, I don't see, have tried to work with this situation they have. They still try to promote this idea that they're equal partners with the Democrats. And sadly, the Democrats have allowed them to do it. This is what Cuomo did with the IDC. But we all need to know there are just so many more of us than there are of them, that there's no excuse in this state that we can't have democratic policies.
Yeah.
So I think it's important we all keep that in mind.
Thank you for that clarification. It's an important note.
All right, Lou Gilson, Hamden, and I want to give the judicial candidate an opportunity to say something. All right, I'm going to give you a hypothetical, a brief hypothetical, and tell me how you deal with it.
I'm not sure I can do that.
Well,
I'm a little restricted as to what I can say as a candidate for judicial office. But go ahead, I'll see what I can do with your question.
okay. You have a situation where a police officer accuses someone of a relatively minor violation. They come into court, the officer gives his sworn testimony, the accused gives their sworn testimony. There's nothing else to go on but the sworn testimony of the two. How do you deal with that?
Well, you as a judge would have to determine the facts. So if the facts are only coming from two witnesses, both whom have given sworn testimony, at some point you're going to have to make determinations of credibility if both things can't be true. If one says black and one says white, they both can't be true. You're going to have to make a determination as a judge of credibility. I've done that for my whole career. I've had to make decisions about my own clients who are telling the truth, who are not telling the truth. When picking jurors for jury selection, you'll get answers from potential jurors that you know may not be true. But you have to make a quick decision on that person's credibility, whether or not they're telling the truth. The other thing that's important is you have to determine what is the burden of proof and what is the standard of proof. In other words, is it the police officer, the prosecution, who has the burden to prove their case, or is it the defendant? In the criminal cases, we know the defendant doesn't have the burden of proof, the prosecution does. But in civil matters, sometimes the burden shifts. So as the judge, you have to, again, you don't wake up fair, so you have to wake up and decide which party has the burden of proof. And how do they have to, by what standard do they have to prove their case? Again, is it a civil case? Is it a criminal case? Is it a motion brought by the plaintiff? Is it a motion brought by the defendant? All these things impact on how you have to think. So that's how I would handle the case. I would, first of all, figure out what the standard is. Who has the burden? And then what are the facts? And then what is the law? And it really becomes, as I tell jurors when I'm arguing to a jury, in most cases, by the way, will be decided by a jury, not by a judge. It's a pretty rare instance where a judge is asked to be the determiner of facts. In most cases, it's a jury, but it can happen. So it's a very fair question. But at that point, it's a matter of putting the facts here, putting the law here, and see if it fits. If it doesn't fit, you have to acquit. And you may not want to. You may have somebody who you think is a terrible person, but they're not guilty of the crime charged because the facts haven't been established to prove guilt. Same way, you may have a wonderful person that your heart just bleeds for, but she's guilty, or he or she is guilty because the case has been proven. All that stuff you have to throw out. You have to throw out the considerations of sympathy. You have to throw out considerations of prejudice, because we all have prejudices. We're born that way. We have sympathies, but all of that has to be disregarded. That's why I say being a judge is a difficult job. Not for any other reason than you have to train yourself to think a certain way, and that doesn't come naturally. So that's how I would handle the case.
I'd like to go and ask one question. Could you hold that?
Yes.
Because we wanted to get you involved anyway. I think this question go to all of it, everyone here. But how do you feel about New York State's bail reform law?
Me?
Well, start with you.
Okay. First of all, I want to make absolutely clear that what a judge does is to follow the law. You know, you hear, during the confirmation hearings that are happening now, and through every confirmation hearing I've ever watched, the question is always, how are you going to decide this issue or that issue? And the response always comes, I can't prejudge the case. Judges follow the law, they don't make law. And that's an important point to make when discussing about the topic of bail reform law, because it's a new law, and it of course has been the subject of efforts to reform it, or to reform the reform, to change it back to the way it was, or to implement cutouts for this type of crime and that type of crime. I can tell you in a general sense, first of all, again, being very careful to say I will follow the law that's in front of me, whether I agree with it or I don't disagree with it. That's the first thing you do when you roll out of bed. As I said, you don't make you don't make law, and I don't intend to. And I really think you know, the best judge is the one who is, you know, seen and not heard. It's, but anyway, the bail reform legislation was overdue, and it was long overdue. It was unfair. It was unfair to people who couldn't afford to raise bail, and it was unfair from the standpoint of the basic premise of our criminal justice system, which presumes people to be innocent until they're found guilty. So the only issue in bail is the person going to show up for court? It's not whether they're guilty, whether they did what they're accused of doing. It is, are they likely to appear for their court appearances in this jurisdiction? If they have no ties to the area in the past, if they have a long list of criminal convictions, including bail jumping, well, that person's probably going to sit in jail, and the bail's going to be pretty high, because the likelihood of that person fleeing the jurisdiction of the court is high. And on the other end of the spectrum is a petty offense, perhaps, where the person has ties to the area, wouldn't know where to go if they had a chance to flee. They grew up on, you know, the land that they live on, and there's absolutely no risk for them to flee. So that is the issue. And what the legislature did when they did the bail reform law is just cut to the chase and say, if you are accused of these offenses, which are not, they're not petty, but they're not of a nature that is going to justify your pre-conviction incarceration. We're just going to say that bail cannot be set. And that makes sense. The judges are unhappy because they feel like they've lost an element of discretion about how much bail, whether bail should be set, how much bail should be set. And there's a group that's saying that this is unsafe for people because these are criminals after all. But again, they're not criminals until they're convicted. So you can't put someone in jail upon the suspicion. Now, I might think Anthony is going to go out and rob a bank today, but that shouldn't justify me putting him in jail. And that's really what the arguments are against the bail reform legislation is, because this person committed the crime once, we therefore think he's going to commit the same crime as soon as we let him out of jail. Therefore, we need to lock him up. And that's not what our criminal justice system is about. It's not locking up people who we think might commit a crime. It's locking up people if they deserve it, who have been found guilty of having committed a crime. So I think that huge distinction is lost on the people who are arguing against the bail reform law and are looking to make changes to it. And I think the people who are very, very loud, including the sheriff in this county, who are against the bail reform law, are really misstating what the law was, what the reform did, and the so-called dangers that are in place of keeping the bail reform law as it is. It's doing what it should be doing. It is keeping people who can't afford $500 from sitting in jail for a month because they can't put together $500.
And it's not violent crimes either, it's, right, violent crime is a separate issue.
There are exceptions to crimes that are considered violent. It's not going to be a situation where someone commits a murder and is released on their own recognizance. That's the statute was well thought out, and it doesn't, I don't believe, pose a danger to the community. But as a judge, again, I will look at what's in front of me. I will look at the person who's in front of me. All the facts come together without whether I agree with the law or don't agree with the law. Does this person have the right to be set free? Answer yes. Off they go, and they can do whatever they choose. They can either continue to break the law or they can follow the law, but that's up to them. If they break the law, they're going to be in twice as much trouble. You can't lock people up to prevent them from committing a future crime. And if some people are just going to keep committing crimes, keep violating that order of protection that is supposed to safeguard somebody, then yeah, they're going to spend time in state prison after they've been convicted. And then, but the people will say, well, what about the woman who's killed in the meantime? Because you know, you let that person out, knowing that there was a likelihood that they would commit this crime again. Well, that's a law enforcement issue. There are things that can be done. You can release somebody who's intoxicated into the custody of a sober person. You can make sure the person is aware, make the police aware, perhaps, or the district attorney can make the police aware of the person's whereabouts, the victim's whereabouts, protection efforts for protection. There are lots of things that could be done besides locking somebody up. That is a huge thing to do to somebody, to take away their freedom, and it can't be. You know, I read something in the paper that in Otsego County, the sheriff's department was complaining that people don't, the homeless don't receive the mental health services that they used to, because it used to be they would get those services in the jail when they would come into the jail, as if to suggest we should round up homeless people, incarcerate them so that they can get mental health services. It's locking somebody up is a serious matter, and it should only be done after a conviction, unless they meet the criteria set forth in the statute to impose bail. And then, if bail is imposed, it has to be the least restrictive manner of bail. It doesn't have to necessarily be lock them up. It could be ankle bracelets. It could be probation supervision with some alternatives to locking people up. So that's how I feel about bail reform law. I think it's a hot topic. It's a hot political topic, but I think it's being mischaracterized, and it's unfortunate because it's important.
I think we have some of our other candidates may want to jump in and add comments, or I don't know. Does anyone else want to say yes?
So I'm a former intern of New York State Senator Salazar's office. And New York State Senator Salazar is one of the lead sponsors on the bail reform bill. And essentially, what we had prior to bail reform was two different criminal justice systems. We had one for the poor and one for the wealthy. Because, and we're not talking about now how this argument of restoring bail is only going to affect poor people. It's not going to affect the wealthy. Because, I mean, there are still wealthy people who do commit crimes. So that has not changed. So that discussion is extremely important to have. But the bail reform, as the statistics are showing, is working. There's a lot of mischaracterizations and misinformation that is being spread out there. And, you know, there are protections in the bail reform bill that protect from people being released who have committed a violent offense, or have been accused of committing a violent offense. So that's also not being discussed as much in the political sphere. That's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, so there's no question that bail reform addressed systemic issues in our criminal justice system that have been left unaddressed for decades and longer. You know, disproportionate imprisonment of minorities, these cash bail systems that keep people in prison and without any opportunity to be back in society. So I'm glad there's a judge candidate here today that spoke so eloquently about that and those issues. I know former Senator Jen Metzger sponsored legislation to empower the judiciary to have more of a risk assessment determination when decision to remain, to have a person be placed in holding. You need to cut through the noise. What we hear from the opponents that want to scare voters into scrapping this law altogether, which would restore those unequal policies and unequal treatment in our criminal justice system, that's not an option. It's unacceptable. That's rolling back. That's rolling back progress. That's not going to work. But I am willing to address issues that have been raised, such as the legislation that was sponsored with our former senator, because I think the judiciary is one of the key stops where they can make that determination, because people are concerned with public safety. I have friends and family that are in law enforcement, and I have concerns myself, but we need to have practical solutions to fix this. And so I am going to be pragmatic when it comes to working with our law enforcement agencies, our municipalities, our local elected officials to understand what are the most sound improvements to that legislation.
Yeah, I think misinformation was the worst thing to happen to bail reform. That really just spun out of control, and especially the divisive politicians that took the reins of that and just drove it to a nasty place where they're going to start attacking all Democrats. I mean, it doesn't matter if your house gets robbed by a rich person or a poor person. It doesn't matter. The poor person would be in jail. The rich person would be able to get out, and they'd still rob your house. I mean, it doesn't make sense when you break it down logically. They say that we don't know what we're talking about, but if you just look at the facts, I mean, that person is getting out if they pay it, and they're just as eligible to commit a crime as the poor person sitting in jail. And a lot of the Republicans that are against it are lucky that they don't slip up one time and not being able to afford bail. And listen, they might get let out for slipping up. They're like, oh wow, maybe bail reform isn't so bad, because I would have been sitting in a jail cell for a month not seeing my family, just because I didn't have the $500 or whatever the bail was to set. That's really all I have to say about that. I'm a proponent of it, and they act like we don't live here. They act like we're putting our communities at risk. They're the only ones. You can only go after Republican houses. That's not how it works. My house is just as good of a probability to get robbed as the next door Republican. It's just a game of chance, and they act like we're making our communities dangerous, and we don't want that. We raise our families here too. We want safe communities, but locking up poor people before they're even convicted of a crime is not the way to do that.
Do we have other questions? What is our...
Did you have a question on the front? She kept raising her hand.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, what's our time?
We were gonna go to one.
One, it's 5 after.
Okay, let's cheat and like one more quick question. Does someone have a question?
She had a question. You had a question. You were raising your hand in the front.
Did you have a question?
Oh, did you have a question?
Yes.
Name and town?
Stand up. Oh. She's Olga from Delhi.
Olga Irwin, Delhi Democrats, Delaware County, etc. Most of you know me. I have we have most of the districts represented here, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
some of you are going to be new campaigners, some of you have campaigned before. Would you stop and think for a moment, especially since I see all of you here, and with all of our group that is here, these are all hardworking Democrats. Would you share at least an idea or two in the districts, the area that you have to cover, as to how you're going to reach the voter? And voters, by voter, that means everybody. How you're going? Give us share it between us, because it's going to become something that that you might. This person might have one idea, other has another. Oh, we'll work on that. So I want our campaigns to really be spruced up and going.
I'll start there. I'm new to the campaigning. I'm new to politics, and I'm trying to run a non-political campaign. So it's interesting. I'm brand new to Facebook. I spent yesterday, really for the first time in my life, on Facebook.
I'm sorry.
As a matter of principle, I have not been on Facebook, but so I set myself up, and I plan to use social media. I'm going to run, I think, a somewhat campaign that is, what am I trying to say, non-traditional. I'm not going to do signs. I'm not going to put a million signs out around Delaware County with my name on it. Probably put up a few billboards. I'm going to shake hands and go door to door. It's going to be old-fashioned campaigning combined with what I can do on social media. But I would also like to debate my opponent, John Hubbard. I think he and I would have a good, it would be good for politics, it would be good for Delaware County citizens, it would be good good to get the issues out there and raised. So I will propose to him that we debate, but otherwise I'm going to just work hard at getting the message out of what I can offer the county, and that's what I plan to do.
One more thing I was going to say, I hope that you all have your Democratic line, but I also hope that you will have an independent line, which is your motto. Whatever you believe in, so often those titles are just wonderful for that. But you need that line too, because there are still people that are not going to, just because you're a Democrat, they're not going to vote for you. They want to have an option on an area to vote in.
Would you like to
Sure.
ask me quickly?
Absolutely quick.
Ask that.
I'm running for the Board of Education of Delaware Academy, so it's a much smaller voting pool, and I can't spend any money. So basically I'm going to get the list of voters, and I'm going to call every single person individually and listen.
Nick?
Yes, I agree with your last point about getting the independent line. There's nothing you could hurt by it. You might need, I think, 1,000 signatures for an independent assembly, but you're out talking to more people, whereas now you have an excuse to get out there and continue going door to door. My motto is cherish unity, because I want to bring everybody together, and I would run that on the line. Door to door is essential, social media is essential, and phone banking is essential. And we're lucky, I believe your campaign will they'll overlap with yours and mine. Yep. So if we can collaborate, we could hit different houses and still talk each other up to cover as much ground as we possibly can, increase the turnout as much as we can, and win in November.
As a publicist, I like your line. It's good.
Yeah, so there's going to be a variety of mediums. So since the pandemic, of course, we all connected with Zoom. And a lot of people can't sometimes make functions. So definitely going to be utilizing Zoom and that's something that candidates, maybe we could host a mutual event. But yeah, good old-fashioned politicking, door to door, meeting people, meeting organizations, speaking with Chamber of Commerce groups, trying to reach as most voters as possible in all different forms. I know a lot of people might not have access to social media, or so might rely on mailers and things like that. So that will be a part of my outreach.
So collaboration is awesome. My campaign slogan is "Together Change is Possible," and so I was planning on running on an independent line as well under that motto. And for me, it's going to be a mixture of lots of different things. We're going to have phone banking, text banking, volunteers to go door knocking, and meeting voters one door at a time, one person at a time. And then we're also going to do direct mailers, specifically around get out the vote and early voting. That way it's a nice reminder for people to vote and get the word out that way.
Can I make sure we get their info?
Yes, that's just I was just about to say this. We've gone over the limit, even though it was just getting interesting. First thing I'm going to do is plug Delaware County Democratic Committee. So one way to get in contact with us, help get us over the hump with petitioning and whatnot, go to DCNYDems.org. I know this is being recorded, and share this. We'll share this with your friends and whatnot, so we'll be able to get information and in contact with the candidates that way. However, very quickly, how does everyone here in the room and whoever's going to see you on YouTube later on, how do they get in contact with your campaigns? All right, so we'll start over here.
Sure. So you can call me. My personal cell phone number is 845-768-4103. And you can also email me at Matthew, that's MATTHEW, at Matthew4change.com.
Okay. You can visit my website, ericballforsenate.com, also on Facebook and Instagram. So I will, as many folks here in the audience too, that share my email address, but you can email me at eballnyssenatecandidate@gmail.com.
Okay, so I'm going to share my website first, because if you forget anything, all my contact information is on there. It's chasefораssembly.com. My personal number is 607-287-8137, and I'll take your call normally whenever I'm not in school. And my email is chaseforassembly102@gmail.com.
I guess the best way to reach me is at my law office, and the number there is 538-9757. That's an area code 607-538-9757. New to Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and my email address is avblawoffice@hotmail.com.
I'm Lauren Glicken O'Leary. You can find me on Facebook, and you can email me at lauren.g.o'leary@gmail.com.